True wealth is measured by a statement that is found in, and because God is with you, even when you are in a subservient position, because success has to be understood in seasons. A lot of discouragement, frustration, stress is on account of unmet expectations in life. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Reality Focus podcast. I am your host, Stephen Richards. It has certainly been a while, but guess what? I have been contemplating a topic that is of interest to this generation, and it is one that practically all of us consider, and that is wealth. I want to talk about what is true wealth. Today, wealth in our society is defined by the accumulation of material possessions, the accumulation of things, money, power, prestige. These things are seen as the ideal, are seen as the goal, are seen as quote unquote success. And when one doesn't have these things as it relates to power, prestige, money, then you automatically start to think of your life as not worth it, as less than. And this is even made more pronounced because when you look on social media and what is going on, there is a particular lifestyle that is portrayed. And this lifestyle tells you that you must be successful and that your worth or your wealth is determined by the things you acquire. I want to set in proper perspective, though, what is true wealth. I'm not saying that there is not an element of material accumulation when it comes on to defining wealth. What I'm saying is that you cannot define wealth or reduce wealth solely to material things. If you were to say, use a percentage for what we consider in terms of the various elements of wealth, I would say material possession is but 5%. I want to look at wealth from a biblical perspective. And the first point I want to share with you is that true wealth is measured by a statement that is found in Genesis chapter 39, verse 2, as well as 20 through to 22. And it is a very common statement that when you examine the main character, who is Joseph here, and the context of Joseph's life is that he had a dream. And his dream was that he saw his mother and brothers bowing down before him. That was the essence of his dream. And on account of his dream, his brothers hated him. And so they threw him in a pit. I'm cutting the story short. They threw him in a pit and he was sold in slavery in Egypt. And the Bible said that he was sold to Potiphar's house, and Potiphar was the captain of Pharaoh's army. And while he was at Potiphar's house, he was a slave. But he was a slave with a difference, because even though he was a slave, the Bible said everything that Joseph did, it prospered. So much so that Potiphar gave him charge of his entire household in terms of running his entire household. And a very common statement is made as we examine Joseph's life. This is a statement: God was with him. God was with him and allowed him to prosper in all that he did. So when you have the time, you definitely can read the story in chapter 39 of Genesis. Now, what does this has to do with true wealth? The first thing that I want to share with us is that true wealth is when God is with you in every season of your life. That is true wealth. when God is with you in every season of your life. And because God is with you, even when you are in a subservient position, even when you are a slave in an undesirable situation, you prosper because God is with you. Even when he was eventually thrown into prison on account of the fact that Potiphar's wife wanted to sleep with him and he denied her access. And she caught onto his coat while he was running away from her. And he was on account thrown into prison. But even then, it said God was with Joseph. Now, when you consider what is true wealth, and it is something that I wish for our generation to embrace, it is more than material accumulation. The question is God with you in every season of your life? You have to understand that wealth, success should be understood in the context of seasons and time. For everything, Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verse 1 says, for everything and for every purpose on the earth, there is a season and there is a time. Your life is governed by season. So you have the season, and I'm using the analogy here of a farmer when he's clearing the land. The very moment he's clearing the land with the intention to plant means that he is successful the very day he started to clear the land. He's not successful when he reaped the harvest alone. But we have a mindset and a type of culture that tells us that success and wealth is when you reap the harvest. But before the harvest, there are processes that you have to engage. There are seasons that you have to pass through in order to build your capacity for that which God has in store for you. And so, just as the farmer, if he's intended to plant, say, an apple tree, the very moment he is in the clearing season, so he's clearing the land, and then after he's plowing the soil, and then he's planting, and after planting, he's curing the crop, and then eventually the harvest comes. Frustration comes when we expect harvest when we are in the planting season of our lives. Frustration comes when we expect harvest when we are in the clearing season of our lives. The clearing season of our lives look like cutting off bad company and influence, staying away from certain environment so that the toxicity of that environment doesn't get into you. The very moment you understand that that's the season you're in, and you are doing the necessary things to cut off all those negative influence, then there and then you are a success. Why? Because success has to be understood in seasons. And so at that season of your life, what you ought to be doing is clearing the environment so that you can move to the next stage or the next season of your journey, which is really plowing and planting. Now, we have a challenge in Western society, and particularly this is exacerbated on account of social media. On social media, you see the lives of so many other people, and it looks successful by virtue of materialism. And it seems as though these people are happy. And so, God, say, for example, God called you in a field of business, but you look over in a field and you see somebody being successful, say, for example, in the medical sector. And that person, on account of you looking at that person being successful, they say, boy, I want to live the life of that person. And so you uproot yourself from that which God has given you, and you try to do that which you weren't even called to do. You don't even have the skill set to do it. But because X is being successful on account of doing it, then you think that your success will come on account of you doing the same. That is wrong. It's almost like the apple tree saying to the coconut tree, look how long you have been planted. It is going 3 to 4 years now. And I've just been in soil for 2 years and I'm bearing fruit. But look at you, coconut tree, planted 5, 6 years, and yet still you aren't bearing. It is foolish for the coconut tree to take the advice of the apple tree. Why? Because they both serve different purpose. And because they both serve different purpose, they both have different processing time and different seasons for which they will harvest. It will take a coconut tree 5, 6 to 7 years for harvest, and it may take a apple tree 2 years to harvest. And so you have to be very careful that you don't uproot yourself from that which God has given you, an area of expertise, an area of giftedness that God has given you. You have to be very careful that you don't uproot yourself because you don't see the harvest. Success, therefore, should be marked by the following thought. Am I being consistent in the direction wherein which God has given me? Am I being consistent in the field that God has gifted me with the skill set and the knowledge? Am I being consistent? Because not because it is God or not because it is faith does it mean that it will be easy. You will have to go through the various processes, the various stages of life until an harvest is realized. But many persons think that they can opt out of the season, opt out of the process, and then move straight to the harvest. And so they pray, they fast, but it doesn't work like that. Due process must be allowed for maturity and for your capacity to develop. And so it's very, very important. The first thing you need to ask yourself is, what season am I in? Because if you don't ask yourself that question, you look over the fence and somebody is experiencing harvest, but that person has gone through the various stages. I've been doing this thing at 10, 15, 20 years, and now they're finally reaping the success. And you just start clearing yesterday, for argument's sake, and yet you expect an harvest. It does not work that way. And so you have to be very discerning of the season that you are in. Because if you're not discerning of the season that you are in, you are going to frustrate yourself and you're going to frustrate those around you. And a lot of the frustration that I'm seeing in this generation as it relates to success, as it relates to having true wealth, is the fact that our generation are not discerning of seasons. So you've asked God for something and it takes 4 days. It takes 4 days and you're saying, boy, God, it doesn't seem as though it is working out. It doesn't work like that. God called Abraham at the age of 75 and he said that I'm going to make you the father of many nations. I'm going to make your seed expand throughout the earth, numberless as the sand of the seashore. And guess what? 25 years after, Abraham was still awaiting the promise. It was not until he was 100 years old that the promise of God came through. And so you have to be consistent in that which God has given you, in the field wherein which God has called you. Because true wealth is not determined by the accumulation of things. It is determined if God is with you. So you may be in the pit, you may be in the prison, but because God is with you, you are prospering nonetheless. And so the bigger question that you need to ask yourself, is God with me in this season of my life? Or have I uprooted myself and planted myself in a different field that God did not call me to? And so you have to have the ability to discern what season you are in life. You have to have the ability to do that, because when you have the ability to discern the season you're in life, it allows you to gauge and temper your expectation. A lot of discouragement, frustration, stress is on account of unmet expectations in life. We expect something to happen in a particular time frame, and it did not happen in that time frame. On account of that, we become frustrated, wanting to throw in the towel. But you should not expect harvest if you are in the planting season. And after the planting season of your life, the planting season may look like you're learning new skill, you are learning, you're growing, you're listening to podcasts, you're listening to wise counsel, and you are growing. That may be the planting season of your life. And during that time, you may be in obscurity. Nobody knows you. Nobody, even know your name. But stay planted, because if you continue in the direction or in the field where in which God has gifted you, then in due time, you will reap the harvest. Now, I want to say to us that, and this is the point here, not because it is God does it mean it's going to be easy. Your faith in God does not exempt you from the process. You have to pay the price for the process. And a lot of us Christians have the mindset that because I have faith, we ignore the development of skills to our own detriment. We think that faith, quote unquote, will allow us to fly an airplane, not having developed the requisite skills and ability. You're only going to crash, because faith does not exempt skill development. And I want to share more about that in the next podcast. I want to talk about the abuse of faith, because much of what we call faith to do the things that God has called us to do, I believe, is an abuse of faith. And so, in recapping, don't let your life be defined by material accumulation, because material accumulation will not bring true peace. But when God is with you, eventually, as you go through the seasons of life, you will reach the point where there is the harvest. You will reap the harvest. And so don't look over the fence because John Brown is enjoying great success. In fact, congratulate John Brown. Rejoice with John Brown. Be happy for John Brown because he's reaping the harvest of his season. But know that your time is coming if you are diligent and if you are consistent in the things in which God has called you. Again, don't frustrate yourself. Don't frustrate yourself if you are in the planting season but expecting the harvest season. If you're in the waiting season but you're expecting an harvest, a harvest will eventually come. Enjoy the journey of life. Life is a gift. Every day you wake up, that is a gift that you ought to embrace. That is true wealth, because without life, you can do nothing. But even more true is the fact that if God is with you in every season of your life, even when you're going through the valley of the shadow of death, you are a success. So success is not when you get the applaud. It's not when you get the big prize. Success is a decision you make daily to be consistent in the things that God has shown you, to be consistent in the field that God has shown you. So eventually, person will know about it. But if you weren't being diligent from day one, then nobody could know about it when the harvest time comes. I often use this analogy in closing. The day you get that certificate from university or from school is not the day you were successful. You were a success every day that you decide to be consistent in school, to be getting up daily, to be going to class, to be studying. That very day, you are a success. And so don't mix up the celebration of success with what is true success, and understand seasons in your life. So guess what? Catch you on the next episode. I do hope you enjoy this podcast. You may leave a comment in the section and we can have further discussion. God bless.